The fog lay heavy over the mountain ridge, curling between the jagged peaks like silent smoke. I remember the night so clearly, a pale light flickering in the distance, the hum of something unworldly vibrating beneath the earth. Each step I took on the damp forest floor pressed into the soft moss, and yet I felt watched, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Somewhere behind me, a low rustling echoed, too deliberate to be an animal. I paused, heart slowing in that calm, terrible quiet, listening to the wind whisper over the crags. And then the lights shifted, quick, deliberate, almost intelligent. I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw the figure, tall, impossibly thin, framed against the mountain moonlight, its eyes reflecting like frozen glass. That's when I knew I shouldn't have ventured this far, but curiosity had already pulled me closer. The hum grew louder and the fog thickened. I never should have opened the door to whatever lay beyond that pale glow. The cabin was small, just wood and nails holding against the wind, the kind of place that feels older than it should. Pines crowded the walls, tall, heavy, breathing in the mist. Their needles brushed the roof like fingers tracing a heartbeat. I came here to be alone, to write, to think. But the silence wasn't silent. It moved, softly, patiently. At night, the fog rolled down from the ridge, sliding between the trees, wrapping the cabin in a pale veil. When the air thickened, the forest began to whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the branches swayed. Out of rhythm, they bent toward me. And the rustling, it shaped itself into words, my name. Over and over, barely there. Like a breath against my ear, I tried not to listen. But every night it grew clearer, whispering just beyond the window glass, like someone standing in the trees, waiting for me to answer. The humming started on the fourth night. A low vibration, deep in the walls. It pulsed through the floorboards, through my skin, a steady beating rhythm, one I knew too well, my heartbeat. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt it match. Each thump echoed in the forest, a response from somewhere out there, like the woods were breathing in time with me. I stepped outside once, just to see. The fog swallowed everything but the first row of trees. Their trunks looked wrong, too close together, too still. When I whispered my own name into the mist, the forest answered. 1,000 soft voices layered like leaves brushing together. They said it back to me, perfectly. That was when I stopped sleeping. During the day, I could almost believe it wasn't real. The sun made the pines shimmer, the ground warm with needles. But at dusk, the light changed. The green went gray, and shadows began to move. Not from the wind, from something else. They gathered between the trunks, sliding over the ground, curling like smoke. I saw shapes that weren't mine, leaning when I stood still, waiting when I turned away. The humming grew stronger. It came from beneath the cabin now, a deep, slow thrum that rose through the floorboards. Sometimes I felt the boards swell under my feet like the wood was breathing. Once I pressed my ear to the ground. The sound was wet, alive, a pulse steady and ancient. And beneath it, a sigh. I ran my hand along the cabin wall. The wood felt warm, like skin. When I stepped back, I saw the outline of my palm sinking into the wood grain, slowly fading as if absorbed. That night, the fog came earlier. It rolled over the porch, thick and silver. The pines leaned close. Their needles brushed the window glass. And through the fog, I saw them. Figures, pale and slow-moving. They weren't walking. They were swaying with the trees, each one tethered by roots, half hidden in the soil. Their faces were soft and colorless, like bark smoothed over time. Their mouths moved with the wind, whispering, always whispering. When I stepped closer to the window, they all turned at once. The forest went still, no wind, no rustling, just silence, so deep it pressed against my chest. Then I heard it again. Not from outside, from within the walls. A faint voice layered beneath the hum. It said my name once more and something else. A single word. Stay. The pines trembled. The ground shifted beneath the cabin. Roots creaked through the floor, thin as veins curling toward my feet. I couldn't move. Not out of fear, but something heavier. something pulling me down. The humming filled my head. My pulse slowed to match it, each beat softer, shallower. I remember closing my eyes, the smell of earth filling my lungs, the faint touch of pine needles against my skin. Warm, welcoming. When I opened them, the fog had cleared. The cabin stood silent. Still, but the forest wasn't empty. Every branch leaned toward me, every root pressed beneath my shoes. And the air pulsed. Alive. I understood then. The pines weren't whispering to me. They were whispering through me, and somewhere deep beneath the soil, the forest took a slow, quiet breath. The sun was sinking behind the ridge when I first saw it. A faint shimmer, too bright to be moonlight, too soft to be fire. The air was cooling fast. You could feel the mountain holding its breath, every pine needle still, every stone heavy with the coming night. I should have gone inside, but the light, it moved, slowly, like it was watching to see if I'd follow. I walked toward it. The dirt under my boots turned to gravel, then to smooth stone, polished somehow, as if something had worn it down from above. The ground felt wrong. Too even, too clean. No cracks, no roots breaking through, just a pale gray surface that hummed when I stepped on it. The higher I climbed, the more the air vibrated. A low, trembling pulse, not loud, but deep enough to live beneath my skin. The light shifted again. It wasn't steady. It pulsed, as if breathing. Each time it flared, the ridge glowed white for a heartbeat, then sank back into shadow. And in those moments of light, I saw them. Shapes. Thin, uneven, moving at the edge of vision. I tried to focus. But the second I blinked, they were gone. The silence pressed in after that. Thick and close, like cotton against my ears. I could still feel the hum, though. Steady. Beneath everything. When I looked down, the stone beneath my hand was warm. Almost soft. It gave slightly, like skin stretched over something hollow. I took my hand away. The heat stayed on my palm. The light brightened, just once, and I saw it clearer than before. It wasn't hovering in the air. It was spilling from something behind the ridge. A soft white current rising into the fog. It shimmered like mist over water, but thicker. Alive somehow, and through it, shadows moved. They weren't walking. They were unfolding. Long, narrow limbs bending in ways that felt wrong, like they'd forgotten what bones were supposed to do. I blinked again. Gone. Only the ridge remained. The pale light flickered and the hum deepened. A slow vibration that pressed against my teeth. Then came the tapping. Soft. Rhythmic. It echoed across the smooth stone. Coming from ahead, just beyond the edge of the cliff. I should have stopped. But it was delicate, almost curious. Like fingers testing hollow wood, each tap pulled me closer. My steps matched it without thought, one after another. I whispered something, I think it was hello, but my voice didn't sound like mine. It came back softer, split in two. The ridge narrowed, and the light spread wider. It wasn't just above me now. It was beneath the cliff, too, seeping up through cracks I hadn't seen before. I crouched, watching it shimmer in the gaps. The air tasted metallic and cold and sharp. The smell of rain that never falls. I reached my hand toward the nearest crack. The tapping stopped. For a moment, everything went still. No wind, no hum, just my heartbeat. Then the light pulsed, hard. The stone under my fingers rippled. I jerked back. But it was already spreading. The smooth surface bending like water, rolling outward from where I'd touched it. It reflected my shape in strange ways. Too many shadows where one should be. Something below shifted. The tapping returned, but faster, as if answering itself. When I looked over the cliff, the light was everywhere. Pouring upward in slow ribbons, curling and folding into forms that almost looked human. Almost. They tilted their heads toward me, faces pale as the glow itself. And when I blinked, they leaned closer. No movement. Just closer. The hum filled the air again, but now it matched my pulse. Each throb pressed through the stone, up my legs, into my chest. I couldn't tell if I was breathing anymore. The air felt thick, weighted with static. I took one step back. The figures dimmed. Another step. They vanished. The light flickered once, twice, then drew itself back behind the ridge, as if swallowed by the mountain. Darkness settled fast. Too fast. The smooth stone beneath me was rough again, cold, real. Only the wind moved now, carrying the faintest tremor in its breath. A sound almost like tapping, fading into the pines below. I stood there until the stars came out. The ridge was quiet, still. But sometimes when the fog rolls down at twilight, I see that pale shimmer again, just for a moment, and I can't help but wonder if it's waiting for me to come closer. The valley was drowned in fog, thick enough that every breath felt like drinking from a river, the kind of air that clings to your skin and doesn't let go. The trees stood close together, tall, black outlines pressed against the pale mist. Their branches curved downward like they were listening. I walked slowly, boots sinking into wet earth. Each step disappeared almost before it landed. The fog swallowed the sound, leaving only the faint hiss of my breath. Then I heard it. Rustling, not the gentle kind that wind makes. Not the small shuffle of something hiding in the leaves. This was deliberate, measured. It came from below the trees, just off the path. A steady push through undergrowth, then stillness. I waited, heart tight, fog pressing close enough to taste the dirt in it. The sound started again, slower this time. Closer. I called out once, just a single word, but it broke apart in the mist, like even the air didn't want to carry it. No answer. Only that rustling spreading wider through the valley as if the ground itself was shifting beneath the trees. The fog moved with it, rippling, changing shape. For a moment I thought I saw shadows move within it, long, thin ones, stretching too far to belong to anything human. I blinked, and they were gone. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, unnatural. Every sound that should have existed, wind, leaves, even my breath, had gone flat. I took another step, and the ground gave slightly. Not soft mud, something hollow. Like a space beneath me, I froze. The rustling stopped. And then, from somewhere very close, something exhaled. Not wind, not animal. A breath, slow, wet, patient. I felt it on the back of my neck before I heard it again. A low stirring beneath the soil, traveling in small bursts, as if something was crawling under the ground. The fog thickened until I could barely see my own hands. The trees had vanished into it. Only faint pillars of black remained. I started walking faster, but every direction looked the same. Pale gray, stretching forever, the rustling moved with me, always just behind. Sometimes to my left, sometimes to my right, never too far. It didn't sound like footsteps. It was closer to fabric dragging through grass, or dry leaves brushing against something smooth. I stopped again, let the stillness catch up. The air buzzed faintly like a low static. It built inside my ears until it became almost a hum, steady, rhythmic. My pulse tried to match it. Then, from ahead, the fog shifted. A shadow flared, quick, like a shape caught in a flash of lightning. Then another, and another. Each time I blinked, they vanished. But every blink left a faint impression behind, like they were still there just beneath the surface of the fog. The rustling grew louder again, but now it circled me. Soft movements brushing the ground in slow arcs. Something pacing, testing the distance. I tried to move, but the air felt thick, as if pushing through water. The hum deepened until I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't sound anymore, it was pressure. Inside the chest, behind the eyes, I knelt, hand pressed to the ground. It trembled faintly beneath my palm. And through that trembling I could feel it. The rustling wasn't coming from the ground. It was the ground. The soil shifted like a living skin, small ripples moving outward, circling where I stood. I pulled my hand back and watched the surface twitch, as if something underneath had felt me. Then, all at once, everything went still. The hum stopped. The air cleared just enough to see the first line of trees again, but between them, shadows leaned forward. Dozens of them, motionless, watching. They didn't move when I did. Didn't flinch. Just watched, their outlines faintly rippling with the fog. I took one slow breath. And in that breath, the rustling started again and that directly behind me. I didn't turn. Couldn't. The sound pressed closer until I felt it along my back, like fingers grazing the fabric of my coat. Then, silence. Nothing. Only the fog and the soft beating of my heart, loud enough to echo through the still valley. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, and even now, sometimes when the wind passes through tall grass, I hear it again, that faint, deliberate rustling below. And I know it never really left the valley. The frost came early that year. By the third week of October, the fields were already stiff with ice. Every blade of grass shimmered like glass under the moonlight. I'd been walking the ridge alone, a quiet path that ran behind the tree line, where the fog always gathered like breath held too long. There was no wind that night, only the hum of something distant, low, steady, like the earth itself was breathing. I remember my boots crunching against the frozen soil. Each step felt too loud, too alive in a world that had gone completely still. Somewhere behind the fog, an owl called once. Then silence swallowed it whole. I almost turned back, but then I saw it. At first I thought it was a tree, something tall, dark, unmoving on the far ridge. But trees don't shimmer, they don't stare back. The figure stood against the sky, longer than shadow, taller than any person I'd ever seen, and its eyes, two pale points glinting like frozen glass catching the moon. I blinked, but it didn't. My throat tightened. The cold seeped deeper, not into my skin, but into my thoughts. Every time I breathed out, the fog seemed to thicken, as if the air itself didn't want me to see clearly. It tilted its head. A slow, deliberate motion, like it was studying how movement should look. I wanted to move, to look away, but I couldn't. Something in those eyes. It wasn't just looking at me. It was looking through me. The longer I stared, the quieter everything became. No insects. No wind. Even my heartbeat sounded muffled, like it was trapped behind glass. The ridge seemed to stretch wider, distance bending in ways it shouldn't. The figure took a step, and somehow, without crossing space, it was closer. Its limbs, they didn't bend right. Each motion felt delayed, like the air had to remember how to carry it forward. My breath hitched. The ice on the grass crackled beneath my boots, and that tiny sound, that fragile sound, made the thing freeze. Its head turned toward me again, too smooth, too slow. The light caught in its eyes once more, and I swear, for a moment I saw myself reflected there, not my face, but something behind it. Something watching from inside my own gaze. I blinked hard. The reflection didn't. There was a faint rustling then, like dry leaves shifting beneath frost. But there were no trees moving. No wind to stir them, only that figure, breathing, or something close to it. I couldn't tell if it was real sound or something inside my skull. It scraped against the edges of thought, like static when the radio loses signal. My eyes watered from the cold. The fog licked around my ankles, curling higher, as if pulled by the same invisible rhythm that held me still. The figure raised one arm, not a greeting, more like a test, and from its palm, light fractured, pale shards drifted into the air, tiny reflections spinning like snow. But when they touched the ground, they didn't melt. They stayed. Little mirrors, each catching a sliver of my shape. Something inside me wanted to scream. But the sound never reached my throat. It just echoed inward. A hollow vibration behind my ribs. The eyes grew brighter. Too bright. The fog flared white, then everything dimmed again, as if the world had blinked. And just like that, the ridge was empty, no figure, no shards, only my breath, shaking in the dark. I stood there for a long time, waiting for the world to move again. When it finally did, the silence broke. A single drop of melted frost slipping down from a branch above. It landed on my cheek. cold, real. I turned back toward the path, but something glimmered at the edge of the grass, one shard I hadn't noticed before. Small, perfectly still. When I leaned closer, the moonlight caught it just right, and inside the glass, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. Eyes. Wide open, frozen, watching. I backed away slowly, carefully, until the fog covered it completely. And even then, I could still feel its gaze. Somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the cold, something was awake. And it knew my name. The valley never used to hum. It was quiet here once. Soft wind, brittle grass, and the faint trickle of water threading through the stones. Now something had changed. The air trembled. A low vibration pressed against my ribs. Steady, mechanical, almost too perfect to be natural. A hum. Endless. Unyielding. I stood at the edge of the fog, watching it pulse like breath. White tendrils moved across the trees, curling around the trunks as if the mist itself was alive. Each inhalation of the valley felt heavier. My ears buzzed. The hum deepened. When I took my first step forward, the ground rippled. Not visibly, but in feeling. Like the soil recoiled from my weight, the air warped. My vision blurred for half a second, like a broken TV flicker. Then everything was fine again. Except the hum. It was louder now. I could feel it inside my teeth. Like a current running through bone. Another step. Another distortion. Static licked the edges of the fog. Shapes began to form. Outlines of something upright, then gone. My pulse tried to match the rhythm, but the rhythm didn't make sense. A figure? No. Just noise shaped like a person. I kept walking. The further I went, the more the valley bent. The trees leaned in wrong directions. Their shadows pointed toward me, not away. Each leaf shimmered faintly, like it was reflecting light that wasn't there. The hum wasn't constant anymore. It wavered, breaking into static bursts. Sharp like whispers through broken wires. Each one felt directed, targeted. I turned my head slowly. The fog thickened behind me. No way back. For a moment I thought I heard my own name buried in the hum, a warped echo, drawn out and mechanical. Then silence. That silence was worse than the noise. It stretched, pressing on my skull. I could hear my heartbeat, fast, wrong, like it was stuttering. When the hum returned, it came from somewhere closer. Low. Under the skin of the world. It wasn't around me anymore. It was beneath me. The ground trembled. Tiny stones danced against my shoes. I crouched down. My fingers grazed the dirt. It was vibrating. Then, a flicker, like lightning but quiet. A flash through the fog revealed outlines again. This time, dozens. Tall, motionless silhouettes, all facing one direction. Toward the center of the valley. And in that center, something glowed. A sphere of pale white light, just above the ground. It pulsed in time with the hum. The static clung to it, breaking, reforming, struggling to hold shape. Each pulse twisted the air, bending trees, bending me. My breath came out warped, like the valley was pulling it through a filter. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The hum rose in pitch, almost like pleading. It wasn't just noise anymore. There were fragments inside it. Fragments of speech. Something like stay. Something like don't move. My vision fractured. Each blink brought a new angle. The valley folding into itself, the trees repeating endlessly, the light stretching thin until it became a horizon. The fog shimmered with static, forming half faces, half memories. Then everything paused. No movement, no breath. Even the hum froze in my chest. I realized the only thing still vibrating was me. The world had gone perfectly still, but I could still feel the hum deep inside my spine, like it had nested there. When I tried to take a step back, the ground wasn't ground anymore. It flickered. Grass, then glass, then a field of static pixels. The valley was unraveling itself, one hum at a time. Something in the fog moved closer. Its shape stuttered, breaking apart mid-step, reforming inches ahead. It had no face and just the echo of one. A blurred outline where eyes should have been, and behind it, more. 100 flickering figures, all vibrating in rhythm with the hum. Their heads tilted toward me. Like receivers tuning in, the light at the center pulsed once more. A long, slow, drawn-out frequency that rattled the sky. Then, everything snapped back. I was standing where I started. Edge of the valley, morning light breaking through the fog, silent, no hum, no figures, just the faint smell of burnt air, and a ringing in my ears that wouldn't fade. When I blinked, for a moment, I thought I saw the air bend again, a soft flicker, like a screen struggling to hold an image, and in that flicker, just before it vanished, the valley hummed. Once, soft, almost tender, as if it was breathing me in. It was near dusk when the ridge came into view. The air was colder up there, thinner, like the world forgot how to breathe. Mist curled along the slope, soft and white, like smoke from something still burning beneath the soil. I'd been walking for hours. The path narrowed, crumbling on one side into an endless drop. Below, the trees were nothing but outlines, a forest drawn in ash. I remember stopping, because I thought I wasn't alone. At first, it was just a shift in the fog, a movement that didn't belong to the wind. I blinked once, twice, but the shapes stayed. Figures, standing at the far edge of the ridge, still as stones, unmoving, but there I couldn't see their faces. Only silhouettes, long, uneven, like shadows that had forgotten their bodies. They didn't come closer. They didn't need to, because even from that distance, I could feel them, a cold pressure against my back, like a hand that wasn't there. Fingers pressing lightly, urging me toward the edge. The fog thickened, swallowing the last of the daylight. I could barely tell where the ground ended anymore. Only the wind moved, whispering through the dry grass, carrying something faint, a hum, low, continuous, somewhere between breath and static. I turned, half expecting someone behind me, but there was only my own shadow stretching across the ridge. Except, it wasn't right. It didn't move when I did. Didn't bend or shift or follow. It just waited. I lifted my arm. My shadow didn't. The hum deepened. Not in the air this time, but in my chest. Like my heartbeat had started echoing wrong. For a second, I thought I saw the figures moving. Not closer, but side to side, as if circling something unseen. Their shapes blurred at the edges, melting into the fog, then returning again. I whispered something to myself, just to make a sound, to break whatever silence had been building, but my breath came out white and my voice didn't come back. Only that hum, threading through the air like a pulse. I wanted to leave. I told myself to turn around. But my feet stayed rooted, and the fog around my legs felt heavier, thicker, like it was holding on. The figures on the ridge swayed, their movements almost human, almost. One of them lifted an arm, slowly, deliberately, and that's when my shadow moved again. But it didn't copy me, it turned its head toward them. Not toward me. The world seemed to tighten. Every sound, every breath, fading until only the ridge existed. Only the fog, only the stillness between each pulse of my heart. I watched my shadow twist, its outline lengthening, breaking apart in thin strands across the ground. It reached, stretching further and further toward the others. When it touched them, the fog folded in on itself. For a moment, everything vanished. No ridge, no sky, no sound. Just a pale gray silence. I don't know how long I stood there. When the fog began to lift again, the figures were gone. And so was my shadow. Only the wind remained, and a faint hum that seemed to come from below the ridge, from the rocks, or maybe the earth itself. I walked back down the trail, though I couldn't feel my legs anymore. Each step lighter, as if something had stayed behind. When I reached the base, I looked up once more. The ridge was empty, still. But as the last of the mist drifted away, I saw something faint on the ground where I had been standing. A dark shape, human, outstretched, like a shadow that never followed me down. It was almost midnight when I saw it. A faint yellow glow deep in the valley, flickering, like a candle trying to stay alive in the wind. The forest around me was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets had stopped. The path curved downward, the trees thinning as the ground opened into a hollow. There, in the distance, stood a small cabin. Old wood, tin roof, and that single light blinking in the window. It shouldn't have been there. The valley was abandoned years ago. No one lived this far out anymore. I hesitated. But the cold air bit through my coat, and the thought of warmth pulled me forward. Each step crunched through frost and dead leaves. The wind carried faint voices, not words, just breaths, whispering between the trees. When I reached the cabin, the porch creaked under my boots. The light inside flickered again. A pulse of gold. Then nothing. Then gold again. The door was open. Just a few inches. Warm air spilled out, soft, heavy like the breath of someone sleeping inside. I called out once. No answer. Inside it was dim. The walls were lined with dust and cobwebs, yet the air felt lived in, like someone had just left. A pot still hung above the fireplace. A chair rocked slightly, as if it had been nudged a moment ago. The lamp on the table blinked again. Its light rolled over the room in uneven waves. Each flicker revealed something different. The empty chair, the cracked window, the outline of my reflection, and something else behind it. I turned, but there was nothing, only that warm air. That strange, steady hum in the walls. I stepped further in. The floorboards sighed beneath me, old wood groaning as though it remembered footsteps that didn't belong to me. The whispers returned, soft, close, circling the room like a slow breeze. I tried to tell myself it was the wind. Just the wind, but the air was still, utterly still. Something shifted in the far corner. A ripple through the shadow, barely there. Like the dark itself had breathed. I froze. The lamp dimmed again, the light thinning until the whole room trembled in half-dark. Every flicker carved faces into the wood grain, fleeting and wrong. Eyes that weren't carved there before. Mouths open in quiet shapes, whispering things I couldn't hear clearly. I stepped back. The hum deepened. The warm air turned sharp, metallic, like rust and electricity. Then everything stopped. No light. No whisper. Just silence. My own breathing sounded too loud. I could feel it echoing off the walls. The lamp came back once more, a weak pulse of light. And in that moment, just for a heartbeat, something stood in the doorway. A figure, still, watching, not moving, not breathing. The light blinked out again. When it returned, the doorway was empty. Only the cold night waited outside. I should have left, but I couldn't. It felt wrong to move, like I was standing inside someone's dream. And if I walked, I'd wake them. The floor beneath me gave a soft crack. And from somewhere above, maybe the attic, came a slow drag of footsteps. One, then another. Then silence. I backed toward the door. Every breath scraped in my throat. My hand found the knob. It was warm, too warm. The lamp flared one final time, and I saw it again in the corner. Not a figure this time, but the shape of one, pressed into the wall like a shadow that had burned itself there long ago, its head tilted, not moving but aware. The whisper returned, soft and tired. Right behind me, I stepped outside. Cold air filled my lungs like water. The valley had gone dark again. No light in the window, no flicker at all, only the cabin's door swaying open and shut with the wind. I looked back once. Just once. The light blinked on again. Faint, yellow, like an eye that refused to close, and I kept walking until the forest swallowed it whole. The snow had fallen all night, thick, quiet layers. By morning, the world looked erased. Every sound had been swallowed. Even the trees stood motionless, their branches heavy with white. And when I stepped outside, my breath rose in soft clouds that vanished too fast. The air bit against my face, but it was clean. Still, at first I thought the marks near the tree line were deer, but they weren't. They were too wide, too long. Each print stretched almost 2 feet, with a pointed end, like something had dragged a claw through the snow. I crouched down. The edges hadn't melted. Whatever made them had passed through only minutes ago. The prints led straight toward the woods. Perfectly spaced. Perfectly straight. Something about that bothered me. Even animals wander. But they moved with purpose. I followed. The trees swallowed the path quickly. The deeper I went, the dimmer the light became. Even the air grew thicker, like the cold itself was pushing against my chest. Snow clung to the branches. Each one sagged under its weight, and sometimes I could swear they whispered when the wind slid past. The tracks never broke stride. Not once. They cut deeper into the snow the further I went. I stopped to listen. My breath trembled in my scarf. Somewhere ahead, something hummed, a low vibration. Barely there, like a pulse hiding in the air. I thought maybe it was the wind. But the trees were still. Not a single branch moved. The prints turned slightly left, then stopped. I stood there staring. The final print was pressed deep into the white, but there was nothing beyond it. No scuff. No retreat, just gone. The snow ahead was untouched, smooth as glass. I took a step closer, and the hum grew louder. It wasn't coming from the ground anymore. It came from above. I lifted my eyes. Through the fog, faint and flickering, a light pulsed behind the trees. Soft, pale, not warm like firelight. It shimmered, the way moonlight shimmers on ice. Each pulse synced with the hum, a slow rhythm, steady and deep. I should have turned back, but something about it pulled at me. Like a heartbeat you can't ignore once you hear it. The fog thickened. My skin prickled. Every breath felt heavier than the one before. The world behind me disappeared. I couldn't even see my footprints anymore. Only that faint glow ahead, bleeding softly through the branches. I stepped closer. The air changed. It didn't feel cold anymore. It felt empty. No weight, no wind. Just the hum. Each tree around me leaned slightly toward the light, their trunks twisted like drawn to it. The snow under them had melted into narrow spirals, frozen mid-drip. I whispered something. Maybe my name. Maybe a prayer. But my voice didn't make it past my lips. The light pulsed again. And for the briefest second, I saw a shape in it, tall, elongated. Its outline rippled, like heat over asphalt. But it wasn't heat. It was wrong. The snow beneath it didn't move. The trees didn't move. Only the light did. Flickering like static caught in fog, it tilted its head. Or maybe it just shifted. There were no features. Just the suggestion of something that had once known how to stand like a person. My heart stuttered. I blinked. The glow flared white, then vanished. The hum cut off. Silence. The fog collapsed against the trees. The woods went still again. I was alone. Or maybe I had been alone the entire time. The snow began to fall again, slow, steady flakes drifting through the gray. They covered the ground where the tracks had ended, erasing everything. By the time I turned to leave, my footprints were already fading. I walked back through the trees. The hum never returned. The light never showed again. But that night, when I looked out from my window, across the field where the forest began, I saw it. Not the shape. Just the prints fresh again, leading out from the woods, stopping right at my door, and the snow was still falling, soft, silent, covering everything. But those tracks. Winter had wrapped the valley in silence. Nights here stretched longer than they should. The kind of quiet that presses against the skin. I stayed in a small cabin, alone, facing the northern ridge. The mountain loomed beyond the pines, black against the pale sky. Each night, the wind came late, slow, heavy. At first, I thought it was the usual mountain wind, the kind that slips between the rocks, makes the trees sway, fills the air with a low hum. But this was different. It wasn't blowing past the ridge. It was coming from it, long breaths, in and out, deep enough that the air itself seemed to stretch with it. The snow drifted in soft spirals each time the mountain exhaled, and when it inhaled, you could feel the pull, faint but real, as though the valley leaned toward it. I watched from the porch one night, wrapped in a blanket that no longer felt warm. Each breath from the mountain made the boards creak beneath my feet. A thin metallic scent lingered in the air, sharp, cold, like blood on steel. I covered my nose, but it stayed. The stars above flickered, and for a moment it felt like they, too, were pulsing, breathing in rhythm with the ridge. The forest below the mountain didn't move. No rustling, no wind, just that endless inhale and the long, shaking exhale. It went on for hours. Too slow to be wind, too steady to be an echo. By midnight, the air had thickened into something that felt alive. Every breath I took felt borrowed, like it wasn't mine anymore. The mountainside glimmered faintly under the moonlight. And then I saw them, tiny points of light, blipping on and off along the cliff face. White, blue, then gone. At first I thought they were distant fires, or reflections of stars caught in ice. But they moved, not randomly, with intent, each blink aligned with the mountain's breath. Appearing as it inhaled, fading as it exhaled, I counted 7. Then 9. Then more, spilling across the rock like a slow wave of blinking eyes. I felt them watching, but not with curiosity. It was older than that, older than thought. The metallic scent grew stronger. I could taste it. Like rain before lightning. Like air that shouldn't be touched. I tried to turn back inside, but the moment I moved, the lights dimmed. Everything went still. The mountain stopped breathing. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was vast, endless, like the pause between heartbeats. I waited for the next inhale, but it didn't come, not right away. When it did, it was deeper, heavier. The snow at my feet trembled. Tiny cracks appeared in the frozen layer of ice near the steps. It felt like the whole valley was being drawn upward, as if the mountain was pulling everything closer. Even me, I gripped the railing. The wood was slick with frost. My breath caught, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was breathing on my own or if the mountain was doing it for me. The lights on the cliff flared again, bright, silent pulses that painted the trees in pale blue, and beneath that light, something shifted in the rock. Not movement you could see clearly, but an impression. A slow ripple, like the mountain itself was turning over in its sleep. Snow cascaded down in long, whispering trails. Each one curved unnaturally, as if drawn toward some unseen center. The hum returned, faint, electric, rising from the ground through my boots. I could feel it in my teeth, a breath, an exhale, another inhale. The rhythm slowed until it matched the beat of my heart. The lights blinked once more, then vanished, swallowed by fog curling from the base of the ridge. I stood there long after it ended, afraid to move, afraid that if I stepped away, the mountain would start breathing again. But it didn't. The valley returned to silence. Only the faint metallic scent remained, settling into the snow like a warning. When I finally went back inside, I shut every window tight. Still, somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, I could feel it. A faint rise. A faint fall, as if the mountain hadn't stopped at all. It had just started breathing. Through me. The fog had rolled in before sunset. Thick, cold, and damp, it clung to my jacket, settling in the hollow of my neck. The crag loomed above the tree line, jagged and dark against a muted sky, like a shadow stretched too thin. I heard it first, a whisper threading through the mist, soft, almost a sigh. My name. I froze. The fog pressed closer, curling around my ankles, making the path ahead seem to vanish. Each step I took toward the crag felt slower than the one before. The ground beneath was soft with moss and fallen leaves, damp, carrying the faint tang of iron. The whisper returned, closer now, layered, as if multiple voices had learned to speak in one. I stopped, closed my eyes, listened. There was something in the fog. It wasn't just the cold. It wasn't just the wind through the pines. It moved with me. A shadow formed at the edge of my vision. It mimicked my posture, my movements. I turned. Nothing. The whispers called again, faint, almost shy. Each step toward them felt like sinking deeper into a world that wasn't mine. The fog grew denser, soft against my face, wrapping my arms, climbing my legs, dragging me with it. The crag above blinked in pale light, not sunlight, not moonlight, but something between, as if the stone itself breathed. I took another step. The whispers sharpened. They were no longer soft sighs. They were coaxing, pulling. A cold taste settled on my tongue, metallic, the scent of damp stone. of wet earth, of something else I couldn't name. The shadow moved again, always mirroring me perfectly. Its edges blurred with the fog, like smoke stretched thin over a flame. I wanted to call out, but the voice in my throat felt borrowed, as though my own name was now someone else's. The crag rose higher, the shadows of the cliff face carved into strange angles, deep fissures like dark eyes. I walked. Every step echoed in the fog, yet no sound returned. Only the whispers, soft and insistent. I reached a ledge. The fog spilled over the edge, curling like slow smoke into the chasm below. The voices fell silent for a heartbeat. Then a single word lingered, a name I didn't recognize. But somehow, it felt like mine. The air vibrated around me, tiny hairs rising on my arms, as if the fog itself had weight, as if it remembered every movement I'd ever made. I looked back. The path behind me had vanished, only white, thick and unbroken, swallowing my footprints as if they had never existed. Another whisper. I didn't need to hear it to know it was calling me forward. Each inhale of the fog filled my lungs, tightened my chest, made my skin crawl. The ledge narrowed. My shadow flickered in the fog, elongated and distorted, mirroring me too well. I reached out. The fog pushed back, soft, persistent, alive. The whispers grew urgent, layering over each other in a quiet hum. It was a rhythm I felt more than heard, pulsing through my feet, climbing my legs, settling behind my eyes. I took one last step, and the fog parted slightly. The crag above no longer seemed solid. The rock pulsed faintly as if breathing. I paused. A shadow shifted within the mist. It bent toward me, not to touch, but to observe. The voices softened again, echoing just behind my ears. Almost gentle, almost familiar. I stepped back. The fog swallowed my footprints. The shadows receded into the white swirl. The crag remained, silent, watching. The whispers lingered, faint now, like wind through a hollow tree. And for hours afterward, even when I returned to the cabin, I could feel the fog clinging to me, softly breathing against my skin, mimicking my every move, as though I had never left the crag at all. The night had settled like wet wool over the valley. Fog rolled in thick, curling around the pines and spilling across the frozen ground. Each breath I took hung in the air, white and trembling. I had walked this path many times before, but tonight the snow felt wrong, soft, almost pulsing beneath my boots. The trees stood still, too still, their branches heavy with frost that reflected the pale moonlight. I could hear nothing, not a rustle, not a whisper, and then I saw it. A figure, pale, fluid, almost transparent, like smoke had been shaped into a body and left standing in the fog. It didn't move. It just watched. I froze. The cold pressed against my face, but my skin felt hotter than it should. My breath caught in my chest. When I stepped forward, it shifted. Not toward me, not away, but like it understood. It dissolved a little at the edges, becoming thinner, more unreal. The ground beneath me pulsed. Each step I took sank slightly, as if I were walking on a sponge stretched over ice, cold, wet, and unsteady. It made my ankles ache. I reached out, hesitated. The figure wavered, and then it was gone. The fog swallowed it. Just as I had taken another step, I stood alone. The pulsing beneath my feet remained, soft, rhythmic, like the earth itself was breathing. The pale light from the moon danced across the mist. Shadows of trees stretched long, but none matched the figure I had seen. I moved slowly, careful not to rush. The fog thickened. Every footfall pressed into the pulsing ground. Each heartbeat echoed against my temples. Then I saw it again. A glimmer of pale shape, fluid, silent, emerging just beyond a tree. It lingered, watching. I realized my own shadow stretched differently tonight, thinner, flickering in rhythm with the figure's pulse. It mimicked me without intent, like it existed outside my control. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice felt trapped in my throat, as though swallowed by the fog itself. The air had a faint metallic scent, sharp, cold, like snow had mixed with something older. I breathed in. It clung to my tongue, sticky, unfamiliar. I took another step forward. The figure drifted back, edges dissolving into the mist, vanishing slowly, deliberately. Every time I moved, the ground pulsed more strongly. The snow sank, softened like it had life. Each step pressed me deeper, but I couldn't stop walking. The figure appeared again, not more than 10 feet ahead. Its form blurred at the edges like smoke caught in a cold draft. It tilted, almost inquisitive. I hesitated. A shiver ran down my spine. The fog closed in around me. My boots sank slightly with each step. The ground beneath throbbed with soft rhythm, a pulse that seemed to synchronize with the figure's presence. It did not speak. It did not move closer. It simply observed. And then, as I stepped forward, it dissolved entirely. No shadow, no shimmer. Only fog and the faint metallic scent lingering in the air. I stopped. The pulsing beneath my feet softened, becoming almost imperceptible. The snow appeared normal again. Still, cold, solid. The fog hung around me, clinging to my sleeves, my hair. The night air pressed close. But the figure was gone. I walked slowly back along the path, each step careful, listening to the hollow silence. I glanced over my shoulder once. Nothing moved. The fog had returned to its quiet drift. The pale moonlight shimmered across the snow. And yet, somewhere deep in the pulse beneath the ground, I could still feel it. Watching, waiting. The night air was sharp and thin. Snow had fallen earlier, but now only frost remained, clinging to the pines like fragile glass. I could see the valley stretched below, silent and pale in the moonlight. The humming returned, low, insistent, a vibration I could feel in my chest, in the soles of my boots, in the bones behind my eyes. It called me, softly at first, then louder, coaxing, as if the mountains themselves had begun to speak. I stepped carefully along the ridge. Each footfall pressed into the frost. The air smelled metallic, wet and sharp, like iron under ice. The hum changed as I moved, rising when I slowed, falling when I paused. A rhythm that seemed alive, synchronizing with my heartbeat without permission. Shadows stretched across the snow, pale and long, leaning toward the ridge. The fog had rolled in again, curling over my boots and pressing cold against my calves. Every movement echoed strangely. Not just my footsteps, my hands brushing my jacket, my breath leaving a thin cloud in the air, even the soft shifting of weight on the ground. It was as if the mountains were whispering back to me, mirroring me. Speaking in a language older than words, I reached the cliff edge. The drop stretched into nothing. The valley below was swallowed in fog, but the humming pressed upward through the rocks, through the trees, through me. The frost beneath my boots shifted, soft, almost pulsing. Each step felt slightly heavier, as if gravity had become sticky. The hum grew louder. A soft static joined it, a trembling vibration that clung to my teeth and made the air thrum in my ears. I wanted to step back, but my feet moved forward on their own, drawn to the cliff, drawn to the sound. I leaned over the edge. The fog rose like smoke from a hidden fire. I could see nothing but the pale gleam of ice and rock. And yet, the humming resonated beneath me, through the earth, through my bones. The ridge seemed alive. The stone shifted slightly under my weight. Edges I had walked on countless times felt uneven, almost soft, like the mountain was exhaling beneath my boots. The humming changed again, layered now, a faint echo answering itself, a call and response I could not escape. I took another step. The fog twisted. Thin shapes formed in it, leaning toward me, mirroring my posture. The cold pressed harder. The air smelled of frost and wet stone. Every inhalation burned. Every exhale vanished instantly into the fog. The echoes multiplied. Each movement I made returned, slightly delayed. My shadow flickered, split, and bent strangely across the snow. I crouched slightly, pressed my palm into the frost. It gave slightly beneath my fingers a subtle pulse. Alive. The humming surged, a wave that rose and fell, like breathing amplified through mountains and sky. I could feel it vibrating through my rib cage. For a moment, the fog parted. The valley glimmered faintly. The ice, the cliffs, the trees, everything trembled in quiet rhythm with the hum. I realized I was no longer moving. The ridge, the cliff, the fog, Everything had paused with me. The mountains had learned the cadence of my breathing. The hum softened. The static faded. The echoes lingered, thin and fragile, like the memory of a voice half-remembered in a dream. I stepped back from the edge. The frost underfoot returned to normal. The shadows settled. The fog drifted lazily, leaving the night quiet again, and yet somewhere deep beneath the ridge I could still feel it. The pulse, the hum, waiting for the next step. The fog had thickened by evening. It rolled low across the forest floor, curling around the trunks of pines, settling into every hollow and root. I stumbled onto a path that shouldn't exist. No footprints marked it. No wind had cut a corridor through the dense undergrowth. Branches brushed against my face. Soft, deliberate, yet the air was still. No wind moved them. The path curved, and curved again. Each step deeper, the fog pressed closer, clinging to my jacket, my hair, my breath. Something glimmered just beyond sight. A reflection caught between the trees. Or perhaps the fog itself had caught a pale light that I wasn't meant to see. I stepped forward. The ground softened beneath my boots. Each footfall sank slightly, like walking on frost over water. The branches followed. Each brush against my skin was a whisper, soft, insistent. The fog seemed alive. It shifted when I turned. Edges curling, stretching, as if sculpted by unseen hands. I reached for the glimmer. It vanished, then reappeared somewhere else, always just out of reach, always beyond the veil of white. The path narrowed. I could feel the trees leaning closer, their frost-bitten limbs scraping my arms, my cheeks. The metallic tang of wet pine filled my nose. I paused. The silence was thick, too thick. It held something waiting. I took another step. The fog pulled with me, soft, curious, pressing closer with each movement. The glimmer flickered again. This time it lingered. A pale, watery light, shifting across shapes in the mist I couldn't name. I realized the path was not straight. It twisted, folded in on itself, leading me deeper than I had expected. Every turn felt deliberate. Every step a message I could not read. The ground pulsed beneath my feet, soft, rhythmic. Like the earth itself was breathing in quiet time with me. I wondered if the path was alive, or if I was simply moving through someone else's memory. I caught sight of shadows moving beyond the fog. Not solid, not human. Fluid, pale shapes, mirroring my movements, watching, waiting. I wanted to stop, but my feet carried me forward. The glimmer beckoned. A reflection, a hint, like a star hidden in fog. The branches brushed once more. This time they lingered, tracing my face, almost like they remembered it. The fog shifted again. The path seemed to stretch longer than possible, curving endlessly, each turn echoing softly behind me. I could feel the hum of the forest beneath the snow, soft vibrations moving through my boots. Through the soles of my feet, up into my bones, the glimmer faded. The shapes in the mist receded. Only the fog remained, dense and breathing, pressing against me from every side. I took one final step. The path narrowed to nothing. Branches brushed my face. The ground pulsed faintly, and then silence. The fog began to thin. The forest returned to stillness. No glimmer, no path. Only the memory of something unseen, and the lingering pull of the invisible hands that had guided me here. The night fell slow, thick with fog that rolled across the frozen ground. The trees leaned into the mist, their branches stiff and brittle, catching the pale light of a hidden moon. I walked alone. The snow muffled my footsteps, but nothing could silence the feeling of being watched. Eyes appeared first, distant, peering from shadows between the trees. Some human-like, round and bright, others impossible, stretched or glowing faintly. Edges blurred as if they existed just beyond comprehension. They followed me, relentless. Every turn I took, every breath I exhaled, their gaze pressed closer. The fog thickened. Each step seemed slower, heavier. The air smelled metallic, wet, and cold. I could feel it sticking to my skin, clinging to my hair, my jacket, pressing the chill into my bones. The sky above twisted unnaturally. Colors shifted in slow spirals. Gray melting into black, black curling into silver. It moved like a living eye, watching me as much as the watchers on the ground. I stopped. The air vibrated faintly. A hum, low and steady, crept under my ribs, through the soles of my boots into my teeth. I looked around. The watchers hadn't moved. Their eyes followed every motion. Shadows stretched and shifted, but none of them left. A faint static rose from the fog. It pressed against my ears, soft, insistent. The air tasted like wet iron, like rain on stone. I tried to blink it away. The watchers multiplied. Eyes appeared on tree trunks under branches in patches of fog that twisted unnaturally. Some of them were human, some of them not. The snow beneath my boots began to sink slightly, soft and unsteady. Each step echoed strangely. A delayed rhythm, a call and response with the mountains, the trees, the fog itself. I moved, slow, careful, but no matter the direction, their gaze found me. I caught a flicker of movement in the fog, a shadow stretching longer than possible, edges bending against light that shouldn't exist. It leaned toward me, curious, patient. I tried to call out. My voice failed. The air swallowed it, leaving only the hum and the distant pulse of the earth. The watchers blinked, a soft, synchronized rhythm. Some tilted as if acknowledging my presence. Others remained still, invisible corners of the fog hiding impossible shapes. The sky twisted again. Silver bled into gray, gray into black. A spiral formed, faintly illuminated, like a whirlpool in the night itself. I realized I could not tell where the earth ended and the void began. The line had blurred, and the watchers existed in both. I took another step. The snow pulsed beneath me, shifting slightly, like the ground remembered my weight. A soft rustle came from somewhere close, branches scraping against themselves or against something unseen. The metallic scent of wet stone grew sharper. It clung to my breath. The watchers' eyes followed, all of them. Human, impossible, every direction, every shadow. I paused. The hum softened. The fog lifted slightly. The watchers remained just beyond the edge of clarity, silent, patient, waiting for me to move again. I moved backward slowly, every footfall pressed into snow that pulsed faintly under me. The fog curled around my legs, curling, clinging, but the eyes did not follow too closely. For a moment, the night seemed still. The watchers fixed, the fog thin, the twisted sky paused, and then I knew. They were always there, waiting, silent, patient. I turned. The fog swallowed my footprints immediately. The hum lingered faintly. The eyes remained, watching. The morning air was thin and cold. Frost clung to the rocks and the pines shivered under a pale, hidden sun. I stepped toward the ridge I had climbed yesterday. Or at least I thought I had. It wasn't there. Where a gentle incline had led me upward, a sheer drop yawned instead. Snow drifted over nothing. The air seemed hollow. I stopped. The wind was still. No birds sang. Even the distant hum of the valley felt muted. I tried to remember the ascent, but my mind gave nothing. No steps, no rustling of boots, no soft snow underfoot. It was as if the climb had never happened. And then I saw it. A pale figure moving along the edge, thin, fluid, almost blending with the fog curling around the cliff. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it had always belonged there. I stepped closer. The ground beneath my boots shifted, soft and unstable. My heart tightened. The ridge I trusted yesterday was gone. Each step pressed me toward the void. I felt the cold breath of the wind against my face, though it was barely moving. The scent of wet stone and iron lingered in the air. The figure paused, turned its head slightly. Its outline shimmered faintly, edges dissolving into the fog. It did not speak. It did not blink. It only watched. I moved again. The snow beneath me pulsed slightly, soft, rhythmic, as though the earth itself was warning me. The void stretched below, dark, infinite. Shadows curled upward from its depths, leaning into the ridge I had once known. I swallowed, tried to step back, but my feet carried me forward. The figure shifted along the edge. One step, two, a movement I couldn't follow, yet it drew my gaze. compelled me. My foot slipped, a moment of weightless panic. Air in my lungs! Snow breaking under my boots. I grasped a rock, trembling, and stopped. The ridge was gone. The drop stretched farther than memory should allow. I could see nothing solid beneath me, only fog curling over void. The figure moved again. It paused, waiting, as if urging me to step closer. The cold pressed against my skin. The wind hummed faintly through the rocks. I felt it in my teeth, in the soles of my boots, a vibration I could not name. I tried to remember yesterday's climb, but there was nothing. No footprints, no traces of my passage. Only this moment, this edge, this impossible disappearance. The figure tilted slightly, fluid, pale, almost transparent. And for a heartbeat, I thought I understood it. It was not threatening. It was watching, teaching me the weight of disbelief. The fog thickened. It pressed into my jacket, my hair, my face, soft, insistent. Wrapping the void in white, I stepped back slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. The ridge beneath me trembled faintly, like the earth remembered my presence but could not hold me. The figure vanished. No trace left. The fog swallowed it completely. The ridge seemed solid again, though I knew better. I stayed at the edge for a long time. The air smelled of wet stone and iron. The wind hummed faintly through the rocks. And somewhere, deep beneath the snow and fog, I felt the pulse of the vanished ridge, soft, rhythmic, waiting for me to return. The valley lay beneath a pale, restless moon. Fog curled along the treetops and spilled into hollows, clinging to every stone and branch. Lights flickered across the floor, small, irregular, like a distant code in motion. Morse, or something pretending to be Morse, I watched, tried to make sense of the pattern. Each time I looked away, the shapes shifted, new sequences forming in the mist, as if the fog itself were writing, rewriting, erasing. The air was cold and metallic. It pressed against my lungs, biting softly at my tongue. Every breath seemed mirrored in the valley below. I moved closer. Step by careful step, snow crunching softly beneath my boots. The flickering lights pulsed in response, or so it seemed, each change too deliberate to be random. I held my hands up, tried to signal, tracing slow lines in the cold air. The lights shifted again. A reply, I wanted to understand it. But the whispers reached me first, soft, fractured, words I could not shape into meaning. The fog twisted around my legs, soft fingers of cold mist. The scent of wet stone and pine hung thick, sharp against my nose. Every time I blinked, the lights changed. One moment a cluster in the west. Next, a single line stretching across the mist. I leaned forward, felt the air thrum beneath my boots, a vibration I could not place. I tried to decode the pattern. Slowly, carefully, dots, dashes, pauses. But the moment I looked away, everything shifted. The message vanished. The whispers came again. Low, almost underneath my ears, layered, overlapping, indecipherable. Yet they felt connected to the lights, a dialogue just beyond my comprehension. I crouched, snow brushing my fingers. The cold bit softly at my skin, but I could not stop watching. The lights pulsed, beckoned. A rhythm I wanted to follow. A faint hum joined the whispers, slow, resonant, vibrating through the valley. It merged with the pulsing of the lights, forming a cadence I could feel in my chest, through the soles of my boots, behind my eyes. I raised my head. The fog parted slightly. Shapes shimmered faintly in the mist, elongated, fluid, impossible to name. I stepped forward. The snow softened beneath me, each footfall pressing into something alive. The lights flickered faster. Almost impatient, I whispered into the cold. No words, only breath. The lights shifted again, and the whispers returned. Layered, soft, insistent. A dialogue I could not understand. I stood at the edge of a small rise. The valley stretched below. Flickers scattered like fireflies. Shadows twisted in the fog, leaning, stretching, mirroring my movements. Every glance away changed the pattern. Every attempt to signal answered in broken whispers. The valley pulsed faintly. Alive. Watching. Responding. I moved slowly along the ridge. The fog clung, wrapping around my arms and legs. The air smelled of wet pine, stone, and something older I could not name. The flickering lights seemed closer now, But when I leaned forward, they receded. A gentle teasing, a soft, insistent beckon. I stopped. The whispers fell silent, leaving only the hum and the pulse beneath my boots. I watched the lights. They danced across the valley floor, shifting, changing, as if alive. And somewhere beneath the fog, beneath the frost and shadow, I felt them waiting, watching me back. A conversation I could not answer, yet could not look away from. The air was thin and sharp. Frost clung to the rocks, and the mountains loomed pale and silent. Cold brushed my neck, soft, deliberate, like something alive had passed just behind me. Every sound was too loud. A rock shifting underfoot, the whisper of my own breath, the soft hum of wind against frozen stone, shadows stretched along the slopes, long, thin, impossible, twisting in ways no tree or rock could allow. They reached, bent and leaned as if studying me from the corners of the world. The ground beneath my boots pulsed faintly. A rhythm, slow and deliberate, like the earth itself was inhaling. I stopped. The cold pressed closer. The smell of wet stone and frost filled my nose. I could feel it in my lungs. A branch scraped the fog beside me. No wind moved it. The sound echoed, magnified, as if the mountains had ears and were listening to the smallest shift of my weight. I moved slowly, step by careful step. The shadows shifted again, leaning closer to my path. Mirroring the tilt of my shoulders, the angle of my gaze, the mountains felt alive, aware, watching. The hum of air through rocks and stone seemed deliberate, a rhythm matching the pulse beneath my feet. I turned my head. Something shimmered in the fog. A pale outline, fluid, shifting impossibly as I blinked. My heart tightened. The cold burned my fingers, bit through my gloves. Each breath came sharp, wet, metallic. The fog twisted. Shapes formed in it, then dissolved before I could name them. They lingered at the edges of vision, taunting, patient, observing. I stepped forward. The ground pulsed slightly underfoot, soft, rhythmic. The mountains exhaled. I could feel the weight of the air against my chest, pressing, watching, alive. A shadow stretched across the ridge, thin, impossible, bending around a rock that did not exist. It followed me, curving, tilting, an echo of my own movement and something older. I tried to call out, only my breath answered. The cold inhaled it back, leaving the mountains silent again. The fog thickened. It clung to my boots, my jacket, my hair. The hum grew faintly in my chest, matching the pulse in the earth, slower now, deliberate, infinite. I stopped, listened. The shadows leaned closer but remained just beyond my reach. The mountains exhaled slowly, and the cold brushed again at my neck. I moved backward. Every step pressed into the pulsing ground. The shapes twisted, following but never touching. The fog thinned slightly. The shadows retreated. The hum softened. The mountains remained aware, patient. I stood alone, breath clouding the frozen air. The earth beneath soft and pulsing. The shadows waiting. And somewhere deep in the stones and fog, I could feel it. The quiet, watching breath of the unknown. The canyon opened beneath me. Steep walls of stone, slick with frost, stretched high into fog that swallowed the sky. I began to descend. Each step careful, soft against the frozen earth. The snow underfoot was quiet, absorbing the weight of my boots. Silence enveloped me. No birds, no wind, only the fog moved. It curled around rocks and trees, soft, deliberate, like fingers brushing against the world. Cold clung to my jacket, to the back of my neck, pressing softly, insistently. The canyon narrowed. Shadows leaned against walls that shouldn't have been there. They twisted slightly as I passed, elongating, bending, as if watching from angles impossible to see. I moved slowly. Every breath came sharp in the frosty air, my lungs tasting faint metal and wet stone. The fog rose higher, curling in thin ribbons, touching my hair, my face, my boots. The descent felt endless. The canyon walls seemed alive, exhaling slowly with me, pressing the silence against my ears. I stopped. A faint rustle moved through the fog, but it was not wind, not even the snow beneath my feet. It was something quieter, patient, waiting. I stepped forward again. The fog parted slightly, revealing twisted shapes of rock, leaning, folding, impossible in their angles. The air smelled of wet stone, pine, and frost-bitten earth. My footsteps echoed faintly. Then nothing. Only the curling fog moving in response. The canyon seemed to stretch further than memory allowed. The walls leaned inward slightly, pressing me gently with shadow. A subtle pulse moved beneath my boots, like the canyon remembered every step I had ever taken. I paused mid-descent. The fog swirled around my legs, and I realized the silence was not empty. It was listening. Alive. A shadow stretched across the narrow path. Soft, fluid, then vanished into the curling mist. I moved slowly again. The cold brushed my face. The fog pressed against my arms, curling, brushing, soft and deliberate. The canyon walls rose higher, fading into fog so thick it felt solid. Every step was mirrored in shifting shadows, as if the rocks themselves leaned closer to watch. The descent continued. Each footfall sank slightly into frost-soft earth. The canyon pulsed beneath me, soft, rhythmic, waiting. I reached a narrow ledge. The fog parted just enough to see the depth below. It stretched into nothing, and yet the silence made it feel as if the canyon held breath. I lingered. The fog curled around my boots, around my arms, around my neck. The walls leaned softly, imperceptibly. I exhaled slowly. The canyon remained still. The fog moved gently. The shadows softened, and somewhere deep in the stone and mist, I felt it, the patient pulse of the canyon, the soft, watching calm, and the endless, silent descent. The fog lay thick over the mountain pass. Cold air seeped through my jacket, clinging to my neck, my hair, my skin. I noticed the first pair of eyes almost at once, pale, unblinking, hovering in the mist. They were not human. Not exactly. I stepped forward slowly. The snow crunched softly beneath my boots. Every sound seemed magnified. The distant drip of ice from rock, the faint rustle of hidden branches, all echoing in the fog. More eyes appeared, clusters in shadows between boulders. Along the edges of trees, even the pale snow seemed to hold their gaze. They did not blink. They did not look away. I paused. The air smelled metallic, wet, and faintly of pine. My breath came fast and shallow. The eyes, they followed me. Every movement, every tilt of my head. I caught my reflection in a patch of ice. It moved with me, but it was wrong, older, thinner, hollow-eyed. It blinked slower than I did, as if observing itself more than me. I stepped again. The snow softened beneath my boots, almost pulsing under weight. A cold hum thrummed faintly through the mountain, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. The eyes multiplied. Some were large, stretching impossibly across fog and rock. Others small, pinpricks of pale light. Every direction I turned, I met them staring back. I tried to avert my gaze. But when I looked into the fog again, more eyes had appeared. They leaned, twisted slightly, curving around forms I could not name. The wind whispered faintly, though the air was still. It carried the smell of wet stone and frost. A subtle vibration lingered in my chest, in the soles of my boots, through my teeth. I crouched, pressed a hand to the snow. It was cold, soft beneath my fingers, almost alive. The eyes watched anyway. I rose. The reflection in the ice shifted again. Now its face seemed stretched, longer than possible, thin and patient, mirroring the impossible patience of the eyes in the fog. I tried to breathe slowly. The fog curled around me, soft, insistent. The mountain seemed aware, waiting, watching. I stepped forward again. The eyes stretched along the ridge, clinging to shadows and pale snow. The chill cut deeper now, pressing into my shoulders, my chest. I stopped. The hum beneath the boots grew faint, a heartbeat that did not belong to me. The eyes. They remained patient, unblinking, as if the mountain itself had opened them. I crouched beside a boulder, felt the frost bite through my gloves. The fog twisted softly around my knees, and the reflection in the ice shifted one last time. It was older, thinner still, a silent witness to the impossible watching. I breathed slowly. The fog curled tighter, the eyes leaning closer in the soft white. The mountain exhaled, and somewhere deep in the mist and shadow I felt them waiting, watching, always. The rocks leaned overhead, heavy and dark. Fog curled through the crevices, chilling the skin along my neck and arms. I noticed the hollow first as a shadow. A black indentation beneath the overhang, soft edges swallowed in mist. I stepped closer. The air smelled of wet stone and cold earth. The fog pressed gently at my boots, curling, brushing, almost aware of me. Inside, faint glows pulsed along the walls. Strange carvings etched deep into the stone. Symbols I could not name. Lines that moved subtly when I looked away. I leaned closer. The cold touched my fingers as I traced one groove. It hummed faintly beneath my skin, a vibration not from the stone, but from somewhere deeper. The symbols shifted again. Angles I had just memorized altered in the blink of an eye. They were alive, or at least aware, responding to the tilt of my head. The pause in my breath. The hollow smelled of wet moss and something metallic like iron pressed against fog. My lungs filled with it, and it pressed into my chest, soft, insistent, impossible to resist. I stepped inside. The walls closed slightly around me, the fog curling in tighter, soft, like fingers brushing along my arms. The carvings pulsed faintly in pale light, echoing the rhythm of my heartbeat. I bent closer to one symbol. It shimmered subtly, as though breathing with the hollow itself. I leaned away for a moment. When I looked again, it had shifted. Curves became angles. Lines bent impossibly. I felt drawn deeper, unable to step back entirely. The air was still but alive. A hum, faint and resonant, pressed against my ears, against the soles of my boots. I noticed shadows along the floor, stretching and folding into shapes I could not name. They mirrored my movement without touching me. The hollow seemed to pulse beneath my weight, soft, rhythmic, endless. The carvings glowed more brightly when I turned toward them. I tried to memorize a pattern, one line, then another. But when I looked away, the shapes had shifted. New sequences formed as if the stone itself were thinking, watching, responding. A faint rustle moved through the fog. Not wind, not animal. Just the hollow breathing or something else deep in the shadows, just beyond vision. I took another step inward. The fog wrapped tighter, brushing my face, my arms, my boots. The hum deepened, pressing in my chest, resonating through every step. The symbols shimmered again. Angles impossible, curves that should not exist. They bent toward me, drawing my eyes, drawing me forward. Each movement felt guided, like the hollow knew the path I should take. I paused. The air smelled of wet stone, cold metal, and something older I could not name. The fog curled around my boots, around my jacket, around my neck. The carvings pulsed softly, and somewhere deep in the shadows I felt it. The hollow waiting, patient, softly, impossibly alive. I lingered in the threshold, breath shallow, fingers tracing cold stone. The fog pulsed, the carvings shimmered, and the hollow held me, softly, insistently, drawn into its impossible depth. The night settled over the mountains. Cold air pressed against my cheeks. The earth smelled faintly of frost and wet stone. I looked up. The stars were wrong, flickering, shifting, rearranging themselves as if the sky were alive. Constellations bent and twisted. Orion stretched impossibly, then fractured into shapes I could not name. The North Star quivered, pale and insistent. A soft hum ran through the valley. Low, vibrating, almost imperceptible at first. Then stronger. The mountains seemed to echo it, their slopes resonating like some alien rhythm. The wind was still, but the air itself thrummed against my skin. Cold brushed my neck and fingers, prickling through my gloves. The scent of stone and pine mingled with something metallic, faint, sharp, unknowable. I shivered, and the stars shifted again. Patterns I had always known bent in impossible directions. Orbs of pale light flickered in and out, like eyes blinking too fast for the mind to follow. I moved slowly along a ridge. Each footstep pressed lightly into frost-soft earth. The hum deepened, resonating beneath my boots, through my chest, through the tip of my fingers. A shadow stretched across a rock face, curved impossibly, then vanished. The mountains remained quiet, but the hum persisted, steady, patient, alien. I lay down briefly on the snow. The chill bit through my jacket, but I did not move. The sky above flickered again, and for a moment I thought it might be breathing. The constellations twisted in slow, deliberate pulses. A star here shifted slightly. Another blinked pale and long. The patterns seemed aware, responding to some rhythm I could not hear, to some pulse beneath the mountains themselves. I raised my head. The fog curled along the valley, soft and cold. It clung to the rocks, to my boots, to the folds of my jacket. The hum resonated in my ears now. Steady, deliberate, almost beckoning. I rose slowly. The air tasted of frost and faint metal. The stars above flickered again and a shape emerged. Impossible angles, shifting lines that might have been a constellation, or might have been something else entirely. The mountains pulsed in time with the sky. The hum pressed against my chest, through my soles, through every nerve. I felt their presence, patient, alien, endless. I stepped forward carefully. The frost crunched beneath my boots. The cold touched my fingers, my neck, my cheeks. The fog shifted around me, curling softly like smoke. The stars flickered again. Patterns I thought I recognized warped into angles I could not name. The rhythm of the hum quickened slightly, then slowed, patient, eternal. I stopped. Breath came slowly, misting in the cold air. The mountains pulsed gently. The sky shifted above, flickering, alive. I lay back again in the snow. Cold pressed against my back. The fog wrapped softly around me. The stars shimmered and twisted. The mountains hummed in alien rhythm. I closed my eyes. The frost bit faintly. The hum lingered in my chest. The sky flickered above, endless, strange, and patient. And somewhere deep in the mountains I felt the rhythm waiting, watching, unfathomable. The path back was quiet. Fog curled along the edges of the trail, soft and damp against my boots. The forest smelled faintly of pine and wet earth. Every step pressed gently into frost-soft ground. My breath came slow, visible, white in the pale light. I reached the clearing. The cabin should have been there, warm light spilling across the snow, the familiar lean of the roof, the soft hum of life inside. But it was gone. Only fog remained. It swirled around scattered rocks, softly brushing my legs, my coat. The air tasted of cold metal and wet stone. Faint footprints pressed into the snow. I knelt to examine them. They were small, uneven, as if pressed by someone or something who had walked softly, almost hovering above the earth. They led to the edge of the clearing and vanished into the curling white. A subtle dread pressed into my chest. Heavy, slow, inevitable. The fog seemed thicker now, curling closer, leaning into the hollow of the clearing. I reached out with a hand. The cold bit through my gloves. Fingers touched nothing but fog. The place where the cabin had stood was empty, but the air around it hummed faintly. A memory pressed into the silence. I walked slowly through the clearing. Every step echoed lightly in the quiet. The snow underfoot felt soft, almost alive. The faint hum lingered in the chest, through the soles of my boots, through the spine. Shadows leaned from the trees. They did not move, yet the edges of my vision felt wrong. Shapes curled, shifted, as if the forest itself were remembering what had been here and what had disappeared. I knelt again beside a patch of disturbed snow. The footprints were gone, as though the fog had swallowed them. A cold wind brushed my neck, rustling dead leaves and branches. The scent of wet pine mixed with frost-bitten earth. I rose. The clearing seemed endless now. The cabin could have been there or never existed at all. The fog pressed around my boots, around my arms, soft, insistent, patient. I took a step forward, and then another. The hollow silence followed me, carrying the sense of loss. Every direction looked the same, every path fading into fog. A soft rustle moved through the edge of the trees. Not wind, not animal. The air itself shifted slightly, almost watching, almost waiting. I paused. The cold pressed gently into my shoulders, the fog curling around my knees. The clearing remained empty. The cabin was gone. Only the memory lingered in the soft hum of the snow, in the faint imprint of footsteps, in the patient, endless fog. I exhaled slowly. The forest held its breath with me. The fog shifted slightly, touching my boots, my coat, my neck. I turned slowly, looking for anything familiar. The clearing remained unchanged. The air tasted of wet stone and frost. The silence pressed in. I walked away, soft footsteps fading into fog. Behind me, the clearing remained empty, and the faint hum lingered, carrying the memory of the cabin that had never truly been there. Fog pressed along the forest floor, thick and cold. Every step sank softly into wet moss. The air smelled of earth and damp pine, sharp and lingering. Shadows stretched between the trees. They moved just slightly, twisting in ways that made my chest tighten. Edges bent unnaturally, leaning closer than physics allowed. I stopped. The fog shifted around my boots. A soft rustle followed me. Not wind, not leaves. Something lighter, alive, deliberate. I breathed slowly. The forest hummed faintly beneath my skin, echoing something I could not name. A shadow twisted. It leaned toward me, then flattened, stretching along the fog like liquid. I blinked, and it was elsewhere, mirroring my last thought, the idea I had barely whispered inside myself. I stepped forward. Soft footsteps pressed into moss and stone. The shadows followed, rustling, curling, whispering. Shapes gathered in the fog, thin, shifting forms that repeated my thoughts back to me. I felt cold along my neck. The rustle moved closer, like dry leaves brushing my jacket. I turned my head. Nothing, only fog, only twisting shadows. I tried to focus. The shapes in the fog echoed every hesitation, every doubt, every thought I had tried to hide. They were patient, watching, repeating. A branch scraped softly. The shadow bent over it. I shivered. The air tasted faintly metallic. The rustling became rhythm, matching the pulse in my chest, matching my own shallow breath. I stepped lightly. The fog shifted around my boots, soft and cold, almost holding me in place. The shadows coiled closer, leaning, stretching, whispering. Every movement I made was repeated, softly, behind me, beside me, in the periphery of vision. I whispered a name. It came back, faint, distorted, carried on the fog and the rustling. I could not tell if it was my own voice or the forest answering. The shadows leaned again, impossibly long, rustling along the ground and up the trees. I felt the chill along. My arms and neck, the hum under my boots and through my spine. The fog thickened, pressing softly against my chest. I tried to step away. The forest seemed to tilt, subtly, bending space around the rustling shadows. Every path I chose led me deeper into shapes that repeated my hesitation, my fear, my thoughts I could not escape. A soft wind passed. The shadows folded into themselves, curling, whispering, rustling. I stopped, breath shallow, fingers brushing damp moss. The fog pressed against my sleeves, around my boots. A slow, living touch. I listened. The rustling echoed the rhythm of my heartbeat. The whispers pressed faintly at the edge of understanding. Words I had not spoken aloud yet knew. Somehow, they knew. I moved carefully. The forest seemed endless, the fog curling, the shadows twisting, each step soft and deliberate, every hesitation mirrored, repeated. I paused at a clearing. The fog swirled gently. The rustling subsided slightly, but only for a moment. The shadows leaned just beyond sight, patient, silent, and the whispers pressed in, echoing what I feared, what I remembered, what I thought I had hidden. I exhaled slowly. The air tasted of wet pine and frost. The forest held its breath with me. The rustling shadows lingered, patient, alive, mirroring my every thought in the thick, soft fog. The fog pressed close tonight, thicker than usual. It wrapped around my boots, my arms, even my shoulders. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a faint tang of metal beneath it. Every inhale felt sharp, cold, alive. Shapes began to emerge. At first, they were nothing but swirls in the fog, soft coils of white and gray, curling and twisting. Then they stretched upward, almost humanoid, almost real. Tall, thin, bending like smoke but moving with purpose. I froze. The cold brushed my neck. A hum seemed to rise from the ground, soft, insistent, vibrating in my chest. The shapes drifted closer. I could feel eyes, though no face existed. They observed me, studied me. Intent hung in the fog, heavy, slow, undeniable. I wanted to look away. Couldn't. My gaze was held, softly, unnaturally. A hand, or what resembled a hand, formed in the mist, curved, pulsing, barely there. It reached, toward the space between us, and I felt the air itself brush my skin. The fog shifted beneath my boots, soft pulses in the earth. I breathed shallow, tasting wet stone and frost. The shapes moved silently, fluidly, their forms folding into each other like smoke in a dark room. I stepped forward, hesitant. The mist recoiled slightly, then reformed, shapes stretching into new angles, new faces that weren't faces at all. A soft rustle moved behind me, branches scraping, or was it the fog itself? Every sound became sharper, clearer, every movement exaggerated. I reached a hand out. The mist brushed against my fingers, soft, cold, pulsing, almost breathing. And for a moment, I felt a heartbeat that was not mine. The shapes paused, silent, watching. Then they flowed forward, more defined, almost corporeal. I could make out slender torsos, heads bent slightly, and hands that trembled with the fog's own rhythm. Their eyes, or the absence of them, followed me. I tried to whisper. Nothing came out. The fog carried my thoughts back, softly twisting, echoing, turning my own mind against me. The ground beneath my boots felt alive. Soft pulses, almost imperceptible, then sharper, insistent. I shifted weight, and it moved beneath me, responding to every step. I felt drawn forward. The shapes moved with me, stretching taller, leaning closer, their presence pressing on my chest and behind my eyes. I dared to breathe. Cold, sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and something older. Older than the trees. Older than the mountains themselves. A figure stepped fully into form. Tall, thin, smooth edges, almost transparent, its intent unmistakable. It leaned toward me. I felt a pull I could not resist. I blinked. It shifted. The fog itself seemed alive, breathing, folding and unfolding, echoing with every inhale of mine. I could not look away, could not move. The shapes pressed close, soft pulses beneath my boots, air brushing my cheeks, silence humming louder than any wind. Slowly, I exhaled. The fog remained. The figures lingered, fluid, intent, alive. And I realized the fog was never just fog. It was waiting, watching, and I was already within it. The ridge rises sharp against the night. Cold air presses my cheeks, carries the scent of stone and frost. I can feel the mountains beneath me breathing. Fog drifts along the slopes like slow water. It curls around rocks, slides over ledges, wrapping the valley below in quiet silver. Pale lights hover at the edges, faint, constant, like lanterns left by unseen hands. I watch them pulse. They do not move closer. They do not retreat. The wind hums through the peaks, a low vibration in my chest. It feels deliberate, alive, as though the ridge itself exhales. I match its rhythm without thinking. My boots press against cold stone. Each step echoes softly, but no other sound answers. No footfalls, no whispers. Only the wind, only the ridge. I lean slightly, peering down into the fog. The lights drift slowly, like tiny eyes suspended in the void. I want to call out. I want to speak. But the air is heavy with silence, and my voice would vanish. A shadow crosses the mist below, too fluid to be a human. It pauses, unmoving. I stare. It stares back. We exist together for a moment without touch, without motion, and then it fades into the fog. I feel the cold wrap around my shoulders. My breath clouds the night. Each exhale seems louder than it should, like the mountains are listening to the rhythm of my lungs. The ridge tilts beneath my weight, not unstable, alive. I place a hand on the stone. It is hard, solid, yet the pulse beneath my fingers hums faintly, in sync with the fog's slow drift. I close my eyes. The wind carries every scent: pine, frost, wet stone, layered, shifting, impossible to separate. A faint static fills the spaces between breaths, and my heartbeat settles into its cadence. No one is coming. Nothing will come. I realize the ridge is the only witness I have ever needed. Silent, constant, enduring. The fog shifts again. Shapes appear briefly, branches bending like arms, shadows stretching long, but vanish as quickly as they form. They are not threatening. Not exactly friendly, just observant. I step closer to the edge. The air tastes colder there. The fog flows beneath my boots like water over a cliff. The pale lights blink slowly in response, or perhaps I imagine them blinking. Everything is quieter than quiet, yet every movement is magnified. I sit on a jagged rock, hands pressed against cold stone. The wind brushes across my face, and I feel it. Not as danger, not as fear, but as acceptance. This ridge, this fog, these silent lights, they are my company. They are enough. Time stretches, minutes, hours, a breathless eternity. I do not try to measure it. The mountains breathe, the fog moves, and the pale lights hover below. A faint rustling drifts through the ridge. Not wind, not animal, just a soft, deliberate movement that mirrors my own stillness. I do not flinch. I do not move. The ridge hums, a low, steady vibration in the bones of the earth. It feels like a pulse, a heartbeat that belongs to something vast and patient. I sink deeper into the stone, into the silence, into the stillness. Alone. Yes, alone. Yet not lonely. Observed, acknowledged, held within something greater than I can name. I watch the lights one last time. They hover without urgency, without expectation. The fog drifts over them, curling around their soft glow. I breathe with the mountains, with the fog, with the ridge. The night stretches on, cold, calm, infinite, and I remain, silent witness to the silent world. No one is coming, nothing will come, only this ridge, only the fog, only the lights below and me. I close my eyes and let the ridge hold me.